The weight of the silence between us was suffocating. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood there, trembling, in the middle of our living room. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a cold, empty shell. David didn't move. He just stood there, with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched. I couldn't breathe. I had just asked him, no, begged him, not to leave. David, please. Don't you care? The words were raw, desperate, spilling out before I could stop them. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I stepped closer to him, my voice shaking, pleading with every ounce of my being. Please, we can fix this. I don't understand. What happened? Where did we go wrong? But his response was as cold as his stare. By morning, I'll be gone, he said, his voice low but unwavering. I felt my world shift, my legs giving way as I sank down onto the couch, a sob escaping me. The room spun around me. How had we gotten here? How had we reached this point? I couldn't fathom it. Just the day before, everything had seemed fine. We had been talking, laughing over dinner, and making plans for the weekend. There had been no indication that the ground beneath us was crumbling. But now, David was telling me he was leaving. His eyes met mine, but there was no warmth in them. No sorrow. Just a cold, detached resolve. I couldn't recognize the man standing in front of me. The man who had once whispered sweet nothings in my ear, the man who promised me forever. Where had he gone? You're really going to leave? I choked out, the words feeling foreign as they left my mouth. Just like that? After everything we've been through? David didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at me, his expression unreadable. And in that silence, I felt something deep inside me snap. I don't understand, David. I don't understand. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room, my mind racing. We've been together for 10 years. 10 years. And now you're just gone? Just like that? His face remained impassive. He wasn't angry, wasn't sad. He wasn't anything. He was a stranger. I don't want to hurt you, Clara, he said finally, his voice devoid of any emotion. But this is the only way. It's the only way for both of us. The only way for us? I repeated, my voice growing louder. What does that even mean? How is leaving me the only way? What's going on, David? What are you hiding from me? I saw his fists clench at his sides. His eyes flickered with something, regret. Fear? I couldn't tell. But whatever it wasn't enough to stop him from walking toward the door. No, don't walk away from me now. I cried out, rushing toward him, my hand reaching out to stop him. Tell me the truth. Tell me why. I deserve to know. I've been nothing but loyal to you. We've built a life together, how can you just throw it all away without an explanation? David stopped in his tracks, his back still turned to me. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he might say something. But then, he just shook his head. You deserve the truth, Clara. But it's not something I can give you right now. Not tonight. Not like this. I didn't understand. The confusion was overwhelming. What did he mean by that? What truth? And why couldn't he give it to me now? Why wait? I don't care what it is, David. Please. You don't just walk out on someone like this without explaining. Please, I need to know. I need to understand. David's shoulders stiffened, and his jaw tightened once more. He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, fear, maybe, in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it came. I can't, Clara, he whispered, almost too softly for me to hear. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. I took a step forward, my hands trembling as I reached out to him, my voice barely a whisper. Then let me decide. Please. I just need to know what's going on. David's eyes softened, but only for a moment. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to summon the strength to explain. By morning, Clara, he said again, his voice more final this time, I'll be gone. The words were like a slap to my face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind was spinning, the room closing in around me. I love you, David, I whispered, the tears streaming down my face. I don't know what's happening, but please don't leave. Don't walk away from me. I don't care what's going on. We'll figure it out together. But David's face remained as cold as it had been from the moment he spoke those fateful words. His lips barely moved as he spoke again, and the finality in his voice sent a chill down my spine. I'm sorry, Clara. But this is something I have to do. For both of us. And with that, he walked out the door. I stood there, frozen, unable to move, my heart shattering with every second that passed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. All I knew was that the man I had loved, the man I had shared everything with, was gone. And I had no idea why. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me from my thoughts. I glanced down at the screen. It was a message from my mother. David isn't who you think he is. The words sent a shock through me, my blood running cold. What did that mean? What did she know that I didn't? I looked at the door, wondering if I had just lost him forever, and then at my phone, feeling the weight of the message like a heavy stone. Everything inside me screamed for answers, but I had no idea where to start. The house felt colder now, emptier, as though David's absence had drained the very warmth from the walls. I couldn't stay in the silence any longer, so I grabbed my phone, needing something to distract me from the overwhelming weight pressing down on me. But my mother's message, David isn't who you think he is, kept echoing in my mind. I knew it wasn't just a cryptic warning. She wouldn't say something like that without reason. The question that gnawed at me was, why hadn't she told me anything before? Why now? And why did it have to come when everything was already falling apart? I stared at the message again, as if the words could somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let everything fall apart without understanding what was happening. I had no answers from David, and now, my mother's text was like a nail in the coffin of everything I thought I knew. I couldn't let him leave without getting to the truth. I had to find out what was going on. I called my mother. It rang twice before she picked up. Clara, I didn't expect you to call. Her voice was distant, almost cold, and it only deepened the anxiety gnawing in my stomach. I need to know what you meant by that message, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you know about David? Why didn't you tell me before? There was a long pause on the other end, and I could practically hear her weighing whether or not to speak. Finally, she sighed. Clara, I didn't want to get involved. I thought you were happy. You seemed happy. But there are things about David's past that, they're not easy to hear. I gripped the phone tighter, a chill creeping up my spine. What kind of things? What's going on? She hesitated again, and I knew then that I wasn't going to like what was coming. David's family, his father, specifically, has a history that's tied to things that are dangerous, things I'm sure he's kept from you. Dangerous? My mind raced. Was David somehow involved in something criminal? Had I been living with a man who had lied to me, kept secrets that were bigger than I could imagine? Yes, she replied quietly. His father was involved in some very shady business. And David, he's been trying to protect you, protect both of you from the consequences of it. But it's catching up to him now. That's why he's leaving, Clara. It's not just because of you, it's because of them. His family. They're dangerous, and they're coming for him. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This couldn't be real. I had known David for so long. He was kind, gentle, loving. I never saw anything that suggested a past like this. But now, the pieces of his life that I had ignored, the long hours, the distant silences, the strange behavior, were starting to make sense in a terrifying way. But why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he warn me about this? I asked, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I don't know, my mother said softly. He probably didn't want you involved, Clara. He didn't want you to have to carry the burden of his past. I think he thought he could protect you from it. But the longer he stayed, the harder it became to keep it all hidden. I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me up. My mind raced with all the new information. David had been protecting me from something I couldn't even comprehend. But why hadn't he trusted me enough to tell me the truth? And why was it happening now? Was it really too late to save him? To save us? Is there more? I whispered, afraid of the answer but needing to hear it anyway. She didn't respond immediately, and I could feel her reluctance. Yes, she said finally, her voice thick with regret. There's more, Clara. But you need to be careful. This isn't just about David's family anymore. It's bigger than that. You might be in danger too, just by being close to him. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Danger? How was I supposed to protect myself from something I didn't even understand? How was I supposed to trust anyone when everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers? Clara, my mother continued, I know this is a lot, but you have to decide if you want to keep digging into David's past. The more you learn, the more you'll be dragged into it. And I can't promise that you'll like what you find. I didn't respond right away. My thoughts were spinning, and I couldn't decide whether to listen to her warning or follow my instincts and confront David. I felt lost, trapped between my desire to know the truth and the fear of what that truth might bring. Finally, I took a shaky breath. I need to talk to him. I need to hear it from him, not from you. I understand, my mother replied, her voice softening. Just be careful, Clara. Don't let your need for answers blind you to what's really at stake. I ended the call, feeling more conflicted than ever. I had to see David again. I had to confront him about everything, about his past, his secrets, and the message my mother had sent. But what if the man I was going to face wasn't the man I thought I knew? What if everything had been a lie? I stared at the door, wondering if I'd still find him there when I opened it. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I couldn't let him leave without giving me the chance to understand. It was late now, but I couldn't wait until morning. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed my coat, rushed out the door, and made my way to his apartment. The streets were empty, the silence oppressive, but my mind was too clouded to pay attention to anything other than the need to get to David. When I arrived, the lights were off inside. The place looked abandoned, as if he had already left. My chest tightened as I stood there, unsure of what to do next. Had he really gone? Or was he waiting for me to come after him, to demand the truth? I knocked, my hand trembling as I reached for the door. There was no answer. He was gone. And I was left standing in front of an empty door, filled with more questions than ever before. The door to David's apartment was still locked when I tried the handle again, and my heart sank. My hand shook as I pulled it away, a sinking feeling gnawing at my stomach. He was really gone. And I had no idea where to turn next. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the door as if hoping for a miracle, a sign that he would come back and explain everything. But nothing happened. The silence was deafening. My mind raced with questions. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to live with the fact that he had left without a single word of explanation? I had thought that when David said he was leaving, he meant it as some sort of temporary thing. That he just needed space, maybe a few hours to cool down. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect him to walk out of my life so completely, so decisively. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice tight with emotion. David, please. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I need to talk to you. I need answers. Please come back. But I knew it was useless. He had made it clear that he was done. He wasn't coming back. I left his building, the night air cold against my skin. I felt numb. I had no idea what to do next. The world around me seemed unfamiliar, as though nothing mattered anymore. I didn't know where David had gone, or even if he had a plan, but I had to find him. I had to get the truth, whatever that truth was, no matter how painful. I walked aimlessly for what felt like hours. My mind was a jumble of thoughts and emotions, each one more confusing than the last. What did my mother mean when she said that David's family was dangerous? And why hadn't he told me any of it? Had I been living in some kind of illusion, blind to everything he was hiding from me? I thought about the warning she had given me. This isn't just about David's family anymore. It's bigger than that. You might be in danger too, just by being close to him. The words echoed in my head, growing louder with each step I took. What was she talking about? What had David gotten himself into? And why hadn't he trusted me enough to share it with me? My phone buzzed again, dragging me out of my spiraling thoughts. I checked the screen, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw that it was a message from David. I didn't want you to get involved. I'm sorry. It's too dangerous for you. The words sent a chill through me. He was still thinking about protecting me, even after everything he had done. But it wasn't enough anymore. I couldn't just sit back and wait for him to figure things out. I needed to know what was going on, and I wasn't going to let him walk away without giving me the truth. I quickly typed a response, my fingers trembling as I tried to find the right words. David, please. Whatever it is, we can face it together. You don't have to do this alone. But he didn't reply. I walked for miles, my thoughts consuming me, each one more frantic than the last. I had to find David. I had to get him to come back, to face whatever was haunting him. But where could I even start looking? He could be anywhere by now, and the thought of losing him forever terrified me. I finally found myself standing in front of the familiar cafe we used to go to, the one we always visited on Sunday mornings. I remembered sitting there, sipping coffee, and laughing with him about the smallest things. It felt like a lifetime ago. I walked inside, my eyes scanning the room in search of anything familiar, but the place was empty, save for a few scattered customers. I sat down at one of the tables by the window, my hands folded tightly in front of me, and I let out a deep breath. I tried calling David again, but once more, it went straight to voicemail. I didn't know why I expected anything different. He had made it clear that he didn't want to talk. I sat there for a while, lost in thought. But as I looked out the window, something caught my eye. There, across the street, was a man walking hurriedly down the sidewalk. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and there was something familiar about the way he moved. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I thought it might be David. I stood up quickly, rushing out of the cafe and into the street, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed through the crowd of people, not caring if I bumped into anyone. I had to know if it was him. I had to know if David was really gone or if I could still find him. I reached the corner of the block, my breath catching in my throat as I spotted him again, a little farther down the road. I knew it was him now. It was David. I called his name, my voice breaking as I shouted across the street. David! Wait! He didn't stop. He didn't even look back. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest as I pushed through the traffic, trying to catch up to him. David, please! I screamed, but he was already disappearing into the crowd. I ran faster, my legs burning, my heart racing, but it was no use. He was gone. He had slipped away from me again. And this time, I wasn't sure I could catch him. I stood there in the middle of the street, watching the crowd of people pass by, the sound of my own breath in my ears. My heart felt heavy with the weight of everything I had lost, everything I hadn't yet understood. And I realized that I had no idea where to go from here. David was slipping further and further away from me, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to find him again. And the worst part was that I had no idea what had happened. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in, as though I were drowning in a sea of questions that had no answers. I stood in the middle of the street, the buzz of the city continuing around me, completely oblivious to the turmoil in my mind. I had lost him again. David. The man I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved, had disappeared without a trace, and I was left standing there, helpless and confused. It didn't make sense. What had I missed? What had he been hiding from me all this time? My mother's words haunted me, his family. They're dangerous. You might be in danger too, just by being close to him. Was that why he had left? To protect me from whatever threat loomed over him? Or was it something else? I didn't know how much time passed before I started walking again. My legs moved without direction, just carrying me wherever they pleased. I didn't care where I went, I just needed to get away from the empty feeling gnawing at me. I had to get out of my own head for a while. I walked until I found myself back at the apartment, standing in front of the door, staring at the locked handle as though it held the answers I needed. But it didn't. The apartment was silent. It always had been when David wasn't around, but today, it felt louder, like the walls were mocking me, reminding me that he was gone. I tried calling him again. No answer. I left another message. David, please. Whatever it is, we can fix this. Just come back. We need to talk. But I knew deep down that he wasn't going to come back. Not now. Not after everything. I sank down on the couch, my eyes burning with unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. I had to understand what was happening before I gave in to the grief that was threatening to overwhelm me. I needed answers. I thought about my mother's cryptic message, the one that had set everything into motion. David isn't who you think he is. What if she was right? What if everything about David's past had been a lie? I had no idea who he really was. I only knew the version of him that he had shown me, the kind and loving man who had shared his life with me. But that man didn't seem to exist anymore. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a new message from my mother. Clara, I've been trying to reach you. You need to understand that you've only seen the surface of David's life. There are things you don't know, things he hasn't told you because he's trying to protect you. But I can't protect you anymore. I'm scared for you, Clara. Please be careful. My fingers hovered over the screen. What could she possibly mean? What was so dangerous that David had to leave me to protect me from it? And if she knew, why hadn't she told me everything sooner? I felt betrayed. But I also felt a growing sense of fear, as though I were caught in something much bigger than I could comprehend. I put my phone down, staring at the empty space in front of me. The truth was, I had no idea where to go from here. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know if it was fixable. But one thing was clear, I couldn't let him go without one final attempt to get the truth. I needed closure. And if David wouldn't give it to me, I had to find it for myself. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment, walking out into the night air again. The streets were quieter now, but my mind was still racing. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't keep running in circles. I had to face this head-on. I decided to visit his old office. It was a long shot, but maybe someone there could help me understand what was going on. I needed answers. I needed to know why David had been so distant, so secretive, and why he had left without a word. The office building was nearly empty when I arrived. The lights were dim, and the only sound was the echo of my footsteps on the cold tile floor. I found the receptionist, who greeted me with a raised eyebrow when I mentioned David's name. David? He left the company a few days ago, she said, glancing at the desk in front of her. He didn't say why. Just that he was leaving for good. My heart skipped a beat. So it wasn't just me. He had left everything behind. His job. His life. All of it. Do you know where he went? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but failing miserably. She shook her head. Sorry. I wish I could help, but I don't know where he is now. I thanked her and walked out of the building, my mind a whirlwind of frustration and confusion. I didn't know where to turn next. But I couldn't give up. I had to know the truth. I decided to go to the one place I hadn't tried yet. His parents' house. I hadn't seen them in months, but maybe they knew something. Maybe they could tell me what was really going on. I drove for what felt like forever, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. When I finally arrived, the house was quiet, the lights off. But I couldn't stop myself. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The door opened slowly, and his mother appeared in the doorway. She looked at me with a mix of concern and sadness. Clara, she said softly, I didn't think you'd come. I need to know what's happening, I said, my voice shaking. I need to know why David left. Why he's been hiding all of this from me. His mother stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. As I crossed the threshold, I felt like I was walking into a different world, one where everything I thought I knew was unraveling. She led me into the living room, where his father sat in a chair, his face shadowed with worry. I've been trying to protect him, his mother said, her voice trembling. But the truth is, his family, they're involved in things that I can't explain. I couldn't keep him here. It was too dangerous for you both. Tell me the truth, I whispered. What's going on? What are you all hiding? His father stood up, looking as though the weight of the world was on his shoulders. David's been involved in things we never wanted him to get into. Things that could ruin his life, and yours. I felt a cold wave wash over me as the reality of the situation hit me. David had been hiding something huge, something I couldn't even begin to understand. His mother looked at me with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. "I'm sorry, Clara. We never wanted you to be part of this. But it's too late. It's too late for all of us." I didn't know what to say. There were no words for what I was feeling, no words to describe the pain of realizing that everything I thought I knew about David, everything I had built my life on, was a lie. I had come for answers, but what I found was even worse than I imagined. David was gone, and he wasn't coming back.